I'm Rosa Whitaker. Welcome to Dominion TV's special on COVID-19, Africa's Response and Solutions. We're now pleased to welcome to the conversation by Zoom Dr. Vera Songwe, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Dr. Vera Songwe, thank you so much for joining us. You are undoubtedly among Africa's top economists and policymakers, and we're so honored and blessed to have you on the front lines fighting this war against the coronavirus. I applaud you and your colleagues at UNECA for the critical information and interventions you are providing in Africa's fight against the COVID-19. Please share more about your work around economic sustainability and resiliency in Africa, and tell us more about how we best protect lives and economies.
Listen, thank you. Thank you so much, first of all, to you, Rosa, for inviting me for this conversation, to Dominion Television, to all the viewers. We are going through a very difficult time, unprecedented in human history. It's almost a century since we last lived something like this. As the IMF Deputy Managing Director, Christina Georgieva, always says, you know, it's so deep and we don't know how much deeper it's going to get. So we need to be bold and we need to act now. And first of all, acting now to protect lives is what we're trying to do at the ECA. But of course, we are an economic institution, so we do need to think about growth. We do need to think about, you know, what will economies, first of all, what are economies facing and how can they prepare for the future? I think the first thing is, of course, our human asset, right? This is our jobs. This is what we need to do. We need to protect lives. We need to ensure that the health systems work. We're working with WHO, and Dr. Tedros said, you know, Africa needs about $15 billion to just manage the healthcare crisis that we have. Of course, there are other healthcare issues on the continent, and we must not forget them. We still lose quite a number of people from malaria. We still lose a lot of people from other curable diseases, tuberculosis, that we need to make sure that the health systems don't get overwhelmed. And we still have mothers having babies, and we need those mothers to have their babies and stay alive. So I think there's a whole human and health particular dimension that we need to take care of. Part of that dimension requires, of course, because we do not know enough about the virus, that we try to do physical distancing. And so the physical distancing part is what has really caused, I think, a big shock to the African economies. Of course, we need to do more testing, we need to do more tracing, and we're not doing enough. We're not there yet. I think across the globe, there is a big scarcity of test kits. But the lucky thing for Africa is that we haven't lost that many lives, and this is great. But what we have done is our economies have collapsed. Our economies have collapsed because airports are closed, because people cannot move, supply chains have been interrupted. And I always talk about, you know, the story of the Kenyan flour or Ugandan flour producer can no longer get her goods into Amsterdam and let alone into New York, because those whole supply chains have stopped. And so people, particularly women, that were, you know, living and making a livelihood off of global trade can no longer do that. The coffee farmers in Rwanda that used to sell their coffee to China, those supply chains have been interrupted and the women cannot go to the farms. So again, our economies have been severely hit. The ECA projects that what we're going to do, what we will see is a 1.8% drop in GDP, and this is in the best case scenario. Of course, we don't yet know when this is going to end. So what we are asking for, what we're calling the international community to do, is to see whether we can get a fiscal stimulus of about $100 billion. But this is in addition and on top of what African governments have already done. You're in Ghana, the government of Ghana up until today has already put in $700 million of stimulus. The government of Cote d'Ivoire, $2.8 million, and on. Egypt, you know, $6.3 million. Of course, South Africa with $27 billion. So quite an amount of resources have gone into our different economies with our own resources, our taxpayer resources. But let's not forget, what governments have also done is given moratoriums. Businesses are no longer paying taxes in many countries. A lot of transfers are no longer happening. The government of Ghana did an amazing thing, is to take in the insurance of health workers. Those are all fiscal spends that, you know, we will need to account for. So the second thing that we're asking the international community is, because governments need money now, actually needed yesterday, to buy kits, to buy oxygen. Everybody now understands the importance of ventilators. What we're asking is for a debt service moratorium, so a 2-year standstill on all of Africa's debt service payments, because this is resources that countries already had in their pockets, and say, we were about to pay for our debt. Rather than do that, let's use it to keep the economy growing. We're seeing across the continent an amazing a boost of innovation. People are doing masks, I'm sure, in Ghana. People are repurposing their production processes to do hand sanitizers and soaps and PPEs and personal protective equipment. So I think some of those resources have to go into that, and we're calling for that and saying, if can we do that? Then there is a whole private sector component. Yesterday we had the conversation with the banks. Because we've asked for a standstill on the banks not to ask their clients to pay them back, the banks are suffering from non-performing loans. The bank's reserve requirements are dropping, so the banks are also struggling, and they need some extra support. And there again, we need some foreign currency coming in from outside to ensure that we can actually buy things that we need with the foreign currency exchanges that we require. So these are all the different pieces of work that we're doing. First, human lives, save those lives, because those are the jobs of the future. That is the basis of our economy. And then secondly, ensure that once we've saved them, there are safety nets for those who cannot work, and for those who can still continue to work, that we can provide and inject some capital so that they have working capital to produce for the economy.
Dr. Songwe, one thing I've noticed about this crisis, and the Africa CDC spoke about it, is that it is helping to form a solidarity in Africa. And I would also say it's bringing out in many quarters some of the best leadership that we've seen in a long time. And certainly you and your colleagues at United Nations Economic Commission on Africa are among them. And I want to thank you and applaud this work. Before you leave, with the few seconds we have left, what do you think Africa's new normal will look like, and how should countries be preparing?
I think two things. One, as we get out of this crisis, we have to remember that we also have a climate crisis, and that part of this process was as a result of us not taking care of our environment, Mother Nature. And so hopefully that as we get out of this crisis, the new normal should be a new normal that that embraces faster and more readily, I think, a new climate, a new resilient, a new sustainable economy. We need to do things differently, and we need to do things better. We need to power our systems with more sustainable and more clean energy. I think secondly, as you said, collaboration. Amazing collaboration between NGOs, civil society, private sector, and the government, which we do not always see in normal times. And I think that we must continue to do this. We must build societies that are much stronger, that are much more cohesive, because without the collaboration, we will not get past the crisis. But to build back, we're going to need that kind of collaboration. Today, we have kids out of school. How are we going to re-educate those kids? We can't do it only by relying on the teachers that used to do it 6 months ago. We're going to need to do it at home. We're going to need to do it in our communities. And so I think these kinds of collaboration are going to be particularly important for the Africa that comes out. So two things: is a more sustainable, more resilient green economy that comes out, and better collaboration across all segments of society, including with women, because women are at the forefront as nurses, and at the back end, still on the agriculture supply chain, providing food for our communities, and we must give them a better future when we get out of this.
Thank you so very much for joining us here on Dominion TV.
God bless you, Rosa, and God bless everybody, and we hope we all come out of it safely. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We invite you to join the conversation. Tell us what you think on all our social media platforms at My Dominion TV.